So the first questions that were asked goes back to the era of the 5th century BC. That is the modern history of humans, isn't it? So we can call it as a prehistoric period. Okay, so 2000 years ago, if you go, we call it as the prehistoric period. So uh, whatever philosophers were there at that point of time were also very keen to find answers, and one of the first persons to ask the question was Hippocrates, and his answer was that mm the development is in the form of heat, wetness, and solidification. So when these three things come together, we see development happening. Is the very simplified explanation that Hippocrates gave, who was a Greek philosopher in 5th century BC. The next person to come into the knowledge gaining process was Aristotle. Just a moment, somebody is waiting, I think so. Yeah. So Aristotle was a philosopher, again, a very important philosopher whose questions that were raised at that point of time uh, was being answered even by present day researchers. Okay, so 350 BC, so more than 2,350 years ago, whatever questions he had asked, that questions were still being answered in the 18th century, right up to the 21st century. People have been asking, trying to answer his question. So just a moment, somebody is waiting. Yeah. So the question he asked is how different parts of embryo are formed. Okay. So it's a fundamental question that if you just observe any organism, we'll be asking. So the answer came in the 19th century only. So before that, people were just either sticking to one or the other form of the philosophy. So the possible explanation was being given in this two form, that is pre-formation. So it is a result of either pre-formation. So the development of the limbs and other body parts in an organism is just based on pre-formation, or the opposite view, that is it may be through epigenesis. Okay. So uh, the view that was supported by Aristotle was epigenesis, and he just conjectured. He just thought that the sequence of events that would occur would most probably would be explained by epigenesis. Okay. Now, what are this preformation and epigenesis? That we'll need to answer. But one important aspect that Aristotle also pinpointed was uh, there are organisms which can be, and especially animals, which can be grouped into those which come out of eggs that we call as ovipary, and one organisms which like mammals just developed internally and are coming through the process of pregnancy and delivered out. So that is through vivipary. So either through ovipary or vivipary, we will be getting the organism developed. So other aspect was what is preformation. So preformation is a concept where the organism the new organisms is already pre-formed, or it is pre-existing. Okay, so it is pre-existing in the present day organism itself. So if you go into the organism, there is a tiny organism that is, we can call it as offspring, is residing inside it. So we just like a layer, like onion, when we peel, there is layer after layer. So the size being just different, the adult has a bigger size, and those offsprings are just the miniature forms of this adult, are just lying inside this adult, is what was the concept that was being given. And from our knowledge we know that this concept was not correct, and there is not this small animal that is residing. So suppose we take gametes. So there is a sperm. So if you consider sperm, people thought that the sperm carried some individual that is just tiny and small, residing inside the sperm, and that when the sperm reaches the egg, that organism itself would reach into that egg, and that organism would then get nourished through that egg, and would come out. That was the concept that was there. So this concept was the pre-formation concept. But opposite to this view is epigenesis, and epigenesis says that there is gradual step by step addition of the whole body, that structure that we know. So bit by bit it's developed through the course of the developmental process, and that is what we call as the epigenesis. So we know that half complement lies in the male and half complement lies in the female. So half complements come together, form a one cell, and this one cell, after the rapid rounds of division, they accumulate numbers, and then they get organized, and then the body structures get formed. So this kind of a concept is what we call as the epigenesis. Okay. So epigenesis, genesis is the process that we call as of creation, and epigenesis is a term that relates to that at a given point there is the development happening. Okay, it is not preformed. Okay, so that is what we mean by epigenesis. So this was what was assumed, Aristotle thought was working. Epigenesis is what was working, and he was not wrong. But because of religious backgrounds and religious philosophies that dominated, and they believed that there is some kind of a force who has created us, that belief was strong. So people more or less tried, majority of the view were trying to support this pre-formation theory, where ready-made forms were created in the individual itself, and that was just nurtured and nourished and developed. That concept was dominant actually, and gradually as the science developed and we see, this pre-formation theory was rejected, and we see over the course the religious dominance in the social structure has gradually receded, and science has got some strong backing among the community, and whatever reasons that have been elaborated by the science have more or less now come to be accepted, and epigenesis has now become the dominant theory that supports the developmental process. Again, Marcello Malfigi, an Italian embryologist, is one person who was not conceived, convinced about uh, the the development that happens, and he believed what we call as the preformationist theory, and he called these tiny individuals as homunculus. Okay, so or we can simply call it as homunculus. Okay, so where a small human was just residing inside this, so this kind of a theories were supported. So uh, uh, we can look at these kinds of concept, and if you look at Marcello Malfigi's work, uh, you might have heard about the Malpighian tubules. Okay, so he was the person who studied embryo and who looked at the embryo and could draw intricate diagrams which represented these structures that he was observing. So uh, this person looked at the chick embryo and looked at the reticulate network of the blood vessels, and he has drawn the diagram. We will look at the diagrams which he has originally drawn in the next few slides. Okay, so Marcello Malfigi, an important contributor to the knowledge in embryology. Then again, this is what the preformationist believed, that is homunculus. And later on, gradually in 1651, William Harvey came about, and he said that all the organisms that we see are ultimately emerging out of egg, whether it may be oviparous or viviparous, all originate. Even the humans originate from egg. So he gave the